So we're recording. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the April 2021 ROSAC meeting, Regional Operations and Safety Advisory Committee. I'm Sandy Miswitz from the Capital District Transportation Committee. My colleague Andrew Tracy and I are sort of co-leaders of this working group, or advisory committee, I should say. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll run through the agenda quickly. So for today, sorry about that. There we go. Today's agenda, we'll start with sort of a final look at the 2020 year in COVID with respect to travel. For today, we'll have some additional updates from Andrew Tracy on some of the regional traffic conditions. I also have data to share with you about CDTA's transit use and some updated information on safety and crash data from 2020. Following that presentation, we're going to discuss our upcoming CDTC data collection effort. We will talk about the legalization of marijuana in New York State and sort of the role the MPO can play in the education piece. Then we will, I'll share with you the update, of the MUTCD memo that the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations developed for use for all of you at the local level. We'll have some additional updates, and then we'll talk about the next meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to get us started on the presentation for today. So take it away, Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. Sandy, can I share my screen?
You should be allowed to.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Okay, how's that?
You got it.
So it's been a while since I provided ROSAC with an update on the data. I've been keeping an eye on the impact of COVID on transportation in the region. If you've attended other CDTC meetings like the Freight Working Group or some of the others, you may have seen some of these slides, but I have a lot of recently updated data to share as well. So I'll begin with the MAP 21 performance measures. There we go. The PM3 federally required performance measures. So at a recent meeting of the modeling working group, the Avail Lab folks from SUNY Albany presented the new numbers for our region. So this is just for the Capital District 4-county region. I took the performance measures from the most recent 3 years so that we could compare the current figures to the pre-COVID figures. So we have numbers here for 2018, 2019, and 2020. And the PM3 measures are level of travel time reliability on interstates, on non-interstates, truck travel time reliability, and then the final column there is the number of hours of excessive delay, peak hour excess delay. So if we take a look at the 2018 and 2019 figures, they fluctuated slightly, but 2020 was very different. So for level of travel time reliability on interstates, the best outcome is 100. That's the best score. That means that 100% of the time travel was reliable. In prior years, it was 95% or 94%. According to the most recent NPM RDS data, it went up to a whopping 99.9% in 2020. And there was similarly an improvement on the non-interstate roadways as well. So this is likely due to a couple of factors. First, overall less VMT in 2020, especially in the early months of COVID, in March and April, when everyone was staying off the roads, very little traffic. But also, and I'll share some more data with this on later slides, we've seen less peak hour traffic, less traditional rush hour traffic in the AM and the PM. And basically the the curve has been smoothed and there's more traffic in the midday as well. With folks working from home, they have more options about when they travel, so they avoid rush hours and do run their errands in the middle of the day. So because of this, level of travel time reliability, interstates and non-interstates, improved a lot in 2020. So we don't know if this will remain for 2021. It's yet to be seen. But if some level of work from home persists, or if some level of schooling from home persists, then we may see improved reliability in the long term as well. Truck travel time reliability, the best outcome for this measure is 1.0. So we actually saw this measure improve as well in prior years. It was about 1.4 down to 1.19 in 2020. And similarly, the peak hour excessive delay was roughly cut in half from about 7 million hours, vehicle hours of delay in prior years down to about 3.5 now. So we'll continue to keep an eye on the 2021 numbers. They're being updated as new NPM RDS data comes in. So one of the more surprising things we've learned so far relating to COVID. The next few slides are some of the highlights from the 2021 Transportation Research Board annual meeting, which was held virtually this year. There were a lot of sessions, about 60 sessions relating to COVID specifically. I've pulled out some of the highlights. This is all national data, so I'll share these slides, and then my last few slides will be the local data, which I've updated. But first, the University of Illinois at Chicago did a big national survey. This was conducted late in 2020, and they asked a number of questions. I've pulled out some of the highlights. First here, commute mode choice preferences pre-COVID and during COVID. And what the researchers found was that, as expected, very large shift in commuter modes away from private vehicles and towards, mainly work from home there, not commuting on the right. But they also saw a very large shift away from transit as well, indicated on this slide by the red lines. Folks that traditionally took transit to work, many of them shifted to personal vehicles or working from home, not commuting. And this is likely because from the very same survey, this is likely because riding public transportation was perceived as one of the riskier activities to do during COVID. For this part of the survey, they asked all recipients, what's your perception of risk for doing all of these activities? Riding public transportation, along with traveling on an airplane, were perceived as the highest risk activities in terms of exposure to COVID, whereas walking and biking was considered the lowest risk. So because of this, we did see a big national shift away from transit. Some of that has recovered. Transit ridership is still lower today than it was pre-COVID. And I do have the most recent local data from CDTA on that on a later slide. Many of the sessions at TRB focused on the rise in e-commerce. There was massive growth in e-commerce early in 2020, in the early months of the pandemic. That persisted through 2020. E-commerce as a share of total retail peaked in April at 34%. Prior to that, it never rose above 15% share of all retail purchases. Over the entire year of 2020, the e-commerce share was 21%, again, growth over any prior years. Total amounts of e-commerce sales went up 40% in 2020 from the prior year. And one of the more interesting things I learned at TRB was that Amazon.com, although they saw growth in sales, many of the other online retailers saw a larger relative growth. And because of that, Amazon's share of e-commerce fell. In 2019, they actually made up about half of all e-commerce, which was a little surprising. I knew they were big, but I didn't expect that they made up half. But that fell to only 31% in 2020 as other large online retailers made up even more ground. One of the other trends illustrated at TRB, this is from a national survey conducted by University of California at Davis. They saw major adoption of telehealth services pre-COVID. Very few survey respondents indicated that they had ever used any telehealth, telemedicine services, either online or phone-based. Younger individuals were more likely to have used these services, about 25% of the individuals under 34. Seniors were less likely. Following COVID, this survey was conducted in the fall of 2020, and what the survey researchers actually found was that slightly more than half of all health visits were now conducted remotely through telemedicine, either by phone or by Zoom or some other method. So this is obviously a major shift in how medicine is provided, and it'll be interesting to see if this remains in the future. And if it does, you know, it'll take cars off the road and maybe make healthcare more accessible. Obviously, a lot of healthcare needs to be in person, but if you just needed to speak to your doctor or nurse about something, maybe in the future that'll only be done remotely. From the very same survey, UC Davis, they asked the survey respondents if they had the option to work from home, and they broke that down by the survey respondents' income. And what they found is not all that surprising. Basically, the more money you make, the more likely you are to be able to work from home. What they found is that the low-income survey respondents, the majority of them felt that they needed to physically go to work to do their job, and the opposite was true for the high-income individuals. So this obviously has a big impact on travel patterns. You know, individuals that work low-income jobs still have to go to work, less opportunity for work from home, and whereas high-income individuals, the reverse is true. This is the final slide I'll show with the TRB data, and Sandy will speak a lot to this, but this is national data from the National Safety Council for the first half of 2020. What they found was that even though traffic volumes had declined, crash rates increased considerably. As a rate, crash rates went up by about 34% nationally during the first 6 months of 2020. Despite the drop in volume, the researchers dug into this a little more and found that there were 4 types of crashes that contributed to the high rate of fatalities, the 34% increase in the fatality rate. The researchers suggested that rollover crashes, ejected passengers, single vehicle crashes, and speeding related crashes were the main culprits here. So all 4 of these types of crashes can be related to speeding and reckless driving. So I think what the researchers were suggesting was that when traffic volumes declined, people are more likely to speed or drive recklessly in general. And this actually had a bad impact on the crash, the rate of fatal crashes nationally. So Sandy will speak a little bit more to the crash data later on. So that was the final TRB slide. I've updated all of the local data I've been keeping an eye on. First, the Google Community Mobility Report. This one is for Albany County, but our other counties have very similar reports. Google continues to update this on a weekly basis, and they compare 6 trip types to their pre-COVID baselines. Retail and recreation, still down slightly. Grocery and pharmacy down only 6%. Visits to parks, this fluctuates a lot, likely based on weather, but as of the time I pulled this report, April 24th, it was actually up 58% from the pre-COVID baseline. Likely, you know, parks are kind of a socially distant form of recreation, so maybe we see more of that now. Trips to transit stations still down about 30%, and this matches the CDTA ridership figures I'll show you a bit later. Trips to workplaces still down about 17%, indicating that even now, more than a year from the New York on pause executive order, there may still be a significant portion of the workforce working from home. These are the most recent ridership figures published by CDTA in their monthly performance reports. So it's actually been a little bit more than a year now from the start of the pandemic. So in addition to comparing to last year's numbers, I also pulled the figures back from March 2019 as well. But ridership is still down. In March 2019. They saw 1.3 million fixed riders on the system. March 2020, that declined significantly because the New York on pause came, I think, March 22nd of last year. And March of 2021, they report ridership still down to 858,000 riders. So we'll continue to keep an eye on this, but for now, it seems that individuals that have a choice about whether they can ride transit or take another mode are still choosing not to ride transit. Finally, my last 3 slides are from the 3 permanent count stations that NISTOT publishes figures for in Region 1. First, the permanent count station on US 9 in Latham. This is 2-way total traffic volume for 24-hour period. I've showed these figures at previous meetings, and not much has changed, but I do have data now for the entire year of 2020. And what we see now is there was a large initial decline in traffic on Route 9 in March, but traffic essentially recovered to its pre-COVID levels sometime over the summer, around July or August, and has remained at that level ever since. So at least on US 9 and Latham, traffic volumes are back to normal, although we do expect that the time of day of traffic has shifted, likely away from the traditional PM peak rush hour and spread out more over the course of the day. Wolf Road in Colony is a different story. We did see a similar decline in traffic in March of last year, but it's been a slower recovery for Wolf Road. There are some gaps in the data where the counter was non-functional. That's represented by these straight line segments here. But as you can see, even as of the end of 2020, traffic had not yet recovered to its pre-COVID baseline on Wolf Road. Pre-COVID, about 30,000 vehicles a day in both directions. In December, there was only about 23,000 vehicles a day. So likely due to the land uses on Wolf Road, restaurants, retail, offices, where folks may be working from home, there's been less of a recovery in traffic on Wolf Road. So we'll continue to keep an eye on this and see if this is a long-term shift or if it will eventually recover. The last counting station for which we have good data for all of 2020, Northway. This is north of Saratoga Springs. Again, large decline in traffic in March of 2020, which recovered to its pre-COVID baseline levels over the summer. There was a seasonal decline later on, which you can see on the right side of the chart here, but that's expected due to the seasonality of the traffic on destinations north. But the Northway, like US 9 and Latham, essentially traffic is back to normal. So at this point, I will turn things over to Sandy to discuss the safety data. And if anyone has any questions, I guess maybe we'll take those after Sandy speaks. Sandy, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Andrew. I will get back into my screen. Give Into presentation mode. So let's talk a little bit about and elaborate a little bit more about changes with the CDTA and the transit system. So Andrew was speaking of the big picture of ridership. What I was able to get access to from CDTA staff was a 3-month snapshot of passenger data at each and every CDTA stop in the system. And we compared pre-COVID from the November 10th, 2019 through January 22nd of 2020 to sort of what I'll call the post-COVID era, basically the same time frame. And we wanted to see how things have changed. In the time frame that we looked at, the ridership system-wide was down about 23%. One of the challenges with this exercise has to do with the influence of the rollout of the River Corridor BRT, which significantly changed the entire transit system in the city of Troy and along that whole river corridor. Some service was added, some service was eliminated. There were multiple schedule changes. So, you know, there is a little bit of awkwardness with the data because of the rollout of and such a major service change during the time frame that we looked at. So we will keep that in mind and look at it again in another year, maybe using the same 3 months to see how things compared now that the river corridor will have a year under its belt. I teased out because the red line BRT is sort of the workhorse of the region. This route, if the riders are folks that kind of live and work in the area, it's less influenced by student travel. It's much more influenced by folks that actually work at essential businesses. So I wanted to see, you know, based off of that, what the stations, the impact of COVID on the stations were in terms of trips. Now, keep in mind, again, it's hard to tease this out by a specific route because obviously the transit stations are shared by multiple routes. So what this is really getting at is at these geographic points, what was the change in ridership? Accessing, you know, alighting and boarding and alighting the service, the transit vehicles. So based on the basically 19 stations in the red line corridor, the reduction was about 19%, almost 20%. So a little less than the system-wide impact. And again, I think that's largely because of the nature of the folks using the red line BRT. There are some students on the Schenectady side, particularly at SEC or now SUNY Schenectady. In terms of the largest reductions by station, the two in downtown Albany, Capitol at Hawk, which is right in front of the state capitol building, and then the South Pearl Street station clearly saw the greatest losses and have not yet recovered. Again, the state workers not being in the buildings yet are influencing that tremendously. There's a number of other activities that are not open right now in downtown Albany, you know, big arena events, plays, shows at the Palace. So it's not surprising to see such a huge drop and continued drop in transit use in downtown Albany. The Woodlawn station is the other one that saw, at least in the red line corridor, a pretty significant drop on the eastbound direction of travel. My suspicion is that might be used as a park and ride lot by users jumping on the buses there and then traveling into Albany. But interestingly, even though the raw numbers in terms of number of riders is low, we saw gains at the Village Center station, which is right in this middle of the village of Colony. I'm speculating that is because there are a number of essential businesses in the vicinity of that location. But it was interesting to see that there was actually an increase in ridership during this time. In terms of looking at some well-known locations in our region and what has occurred, it's no surprise to anybody here that the SUNY Albany Collins Circle stop saw the largest drop in riders. The students haven't been here. In many cases, they're still not here. It will be interesting to see next year, presumably if the students are back full-time in person for in-person learning, what the impact there will be. Over at Crossgates Mall, we saw that similar sort of 42% decline that we saw in some of those stops on the Red Line corridor. Again, the shopping mall didn't have a lot going on. There were, hours were reduced. Hours, I believe, are still reduced. So we saw big drops there. Gateway Plaza in downtown Schenectady. This is the one adjacent to Schenectady County Community College, or SUNY Schenectady. So again, student influence there. But just to see what would happen when you looked at certain types of businesses that are essential. And I just picked Walmart only because it's a very popular store and there is a lot of transit service typically provided to the Walmarts in the region. I picked the one up in Latham and the one out in Brunswick and Rensselaer County. And as you can see, the ridership did drop, but not by as much. There is still a drop in ridership though. So we'll continue to monitor these well-known locations over time with CDTA, and I think it'll be an interesting exercise as we get into the bus lane feasibility study, how ridership continues to recover. But again, thinking about the nature of our region and who uses transit, it is not surprising at all that the students and the state employee workforce are big drivers to folks not really using transit right now because they're just not here and doing in-person activities. In terms of our crash data, I teased out for 2019 and 2020 just for snapshot comparison purposes, the fatal and injury crashes. Everything I'm showing you is specific to fatal and all injury crashes. There's no property damage data in what I'm showing you today. Just in terms of numbers of crashes, again, number of fatal and injury crashes, we had about 4,600 plus in the region in 2019. It dropped to 3,400 in 2020. So we clearly saw that reduction in overall crashes, and by day of week, you can see the larger drops were obviously midweek, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with not as much change, but still some change on the weekends. Again, that's not super surprising because, again, if the bulk of folks that we saw in the transit system weren't using it, our Monday to Friday activities, state employees and students, it's not surprising that we saw a similar pattern with the crash data. And keep in mind, and I put a note on each of these slides, that the 2020 data is very preliminary at this point, so it is just a snapshot of what's going on in our region. In terms of numbers, number of fatal crashes, the small table on the left shows the difference between 2019 and 2020. And, as Andrew noted on the national data, we did see an increase in the number of fatal crashes between the 2 years. However, when you look at the injury data, we were definitely much lower on the injuries than we saw in 2019 and 2020. So that kind of points to perhaps the type of driver that was on the roadway. We'll get into that in some of the next slides. When I looked at sort of the collision type or the crashes for specifically the fatal crashes, and this is now going to reflect the number of fatalities, so the actual number of people who passed away in a motor vehicle crash. You'll see the numbers change, that we had 46 fatalities versus 53 fatalities. So again, a much higher number. The items in bold show where we saw the biggest increases: motor vehicle on motor vehicle related crashes. Collisions with pedestrians ironically decreased, which is counter to what we've been hearing at the national level. Nationally, they've been saying pedestrian fatalities have increased. Collisions with things like signposts and trees saw increases. So that tells me that a lot of what we're experiencing here in the region, again, may reflect the type of driver that was on the roadway with a more wide open street network, ability to drive faster, maybe making some unwise choices. and losing control of their vehicle and perhaps hitting an object. In terms of the road system types involved in the where the crashes were occurring for all fatal and serious injury crashes, we did see a decline on the state highway system, and this is just the share of the pie. This is not actual numbers, but the share of the pie definitely decreased. It also increased in the cities. So we had more activity in the city related to fatal and serious injury crashes, which was an interesting finding, and we'll dig into the reasons behind that more at a future time. In terms of the sort of crash type, fixed object, pedestrian, bicycle, etc. In terms of the pie, motor vehicles on a motor vehicle crash declined, but the fixed object crashes increased in 2020. Pedestrians, and I should say increased, but increased the share of the pie in 2020. These are the two pie charts, are not a direct comparison of numbers. What is a direct comparison of numbers is the table below. In terms of the raw numbers, we saw a decline in overall motor vehicle crashes. We saw a decline in fixed object crashes, even though those fatalities went up in some of those categories. We saw a decline in the pedestrian crashes. We saw basically the same activity for bicyclists, which is interesting because we know anecdotally that bicycle ridership went significantly up during the pandemic. So it's actually not surprising to see that stayed flat and actually increased extremely slightly, but basically remained flat, whereas all of the other categories saw a decline. And there was an other category for which it was a little hard to decipher. And as I said, this is raw data. So there could be more clarifications on some of those other types of crashes in the future. In terms of the contributing factors, this is police reported data available to date, and I only picked the top 10 just to highlight the top 10 factors that were reported on crash reports. This data is also preliminary, but as you can see, when you look at comparing 2019 and 2020, first of all, the top 10 types of contributing factors were exactly the same 10. So there were no changes there. However, you can see that in the higher numbers where we have failure to yield right away, the driver distraction and inattention, following too closely, the drop was larger there between 2019 and 2020 than it was for all of the other contributing factors, including unsafe speed, improper passing, running a red light and traffic control device disregards, alcohol involvement, etc. So that was a little bit of an interesting finding that certain types of contributing factors did decline to a greater extent than others. And with that, that's all I had on the crash data. We'll certainly be continuing to watch this. You know, as I've said in the past, there's a huge lag of time when crash data becomes available to us to really analyze. It'll probably be until the fall when the final data is released by ITSMR. So we'll follow up on this at a future meeting. Any questions about any of the material Andrew and I shared today? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda then, which is related to our COVID traffic monitoring and our data collection path. So Andrew, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. Sandy and I have been working on developing an RFP for data collection for a number of purposes, including collecting traffic counts to try to monitor what the shift has been in traffic in the region due to COVID. So we know that there was, you know, obviously starting in March of last year, an enormous initial impact. But what we want to try to determine is what's the lasting impact going to be? Is there going to be any permanent changes in travel behavior in the region due to COVID? We expect that there will be some work from home that remains even after the COVID restrictions are lifted and everyone goes back to work, we expect that some companies, some organizations may still allow partial work from home. We expect that colleges and universities, since they were forced to bring all their classes online last year, maybe they will realize that now that they have the infrastructure for that and the ability to do that, and maybe now many courses will be taught remotely when they were traditionally in person. So we expect some shift in traffic in the region will persist in the long term. Sandy and I are developing the RFP, and we hope to do the counts in the fall of this year, because hopefully by then things will have stabilized, reached a new equilibrium. Maybe in the fall we'll get to see what the new normal is. So I'd like to open this up for discussion to everybody on the call. We're looking for places that we can conduct traffic counts where we expect that there will be some shift in traffic or shift in the time of day of traffic as well due to COVID. So we're looking to conduct counts at roadways that serve, for example, colleges and universities. We're looking to conduct counts at roadways that serve places of employment, especially for sectors of the economy that may have lingering work from home, like, for example, tech sectors. We expect maybe more amenable to work from home. And we're identifying these locations, and then we're digging through and trying to find pre-COVID counts that we could use for baselines for comparisons. So we may have pre-COVID counts from planning studies that we did, or counts that DOT conducted, or even local counts that were done in connection with developments. So I'd like to open up the floor to discussion. Does anybody know of any roadways where you'd like us to do a count in the fall to determine if COVID has had a lasting impact on traffic there?
Andrew, one of the things I wanted to, it's off topic but on topic at the same time, kind of backing up to what you and Sandy were talking about, but the news today was that you no longer have to eat if you're going to drink. They're going to waive that requirement. So I would be curious, I work with Schenectady County, Governor's Traffic Safety Board and all these things. I'd be interested to see, are people going to start going out socially drinking? Are we going to see, I don't recall in your number, Sandy, but DWIs and impaired driving, but I mean, essentially we've had over a year of, curfew with no alcohol. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be, you're talking about counts. All I'm thinking of is coordinating where DWI stops would have been in the past, to see, like, are cars driving more? Are people going to hit it? Are we going to go out and see people, celebrating, and going, I haven't been out in so long. We're going to go out and we're going to live it up because no more Cuomo chips, and we can go out till midnight and I got my shot. So I don't know if it's this, but I would like to, I think all of these legal little landmarks need to be memorialized somewhere, so that they go onto your charts, so that you can see, like, okay, today was the day you don't have to, have food to drink. And then a couple months ago is when the shots came out. And then this is when, just because you may see a trend somewhere in there. I'm not sure you're going to, and I get what you're doing too, with trying to get this data there. But just because of that news article in my head, that got me thinking, like, I haven't drank and drive because I haven't drank outside of my home in over a year. Where am I going to go? So I could see that being something. And Sandy, to your point, the roads are open. Maybe they're still a little open. I saw Valerie's comment. We talked about at the last meeting, we're using the parking lots, and I can still send you, Sandy, if you guys want the parking lot information we have in the city for, we still have a lot of availability in our parking lots. So it's better, but it's still not pre-COVID.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Chris. I would expect with relation to the first thing you mentioned with maybe people going out to bars more, I expect that maybe the impact of that wouldn't show up much in traffic counts, but I expect that it may show up in the safety data and the crash data, but it would take a while to do so. But maybe if Sandy continues to keep an eye on crash rates broken down by type or influencing factors identified in the crash reports, then maybe you're right. Maybe we should drop a milestone and compare DWI rates before and after. I think that would be a good study to do.
Yeah, anecdotally, looking at the crashes involving alcohol, there were quite a number of them. You know, once we see the final data set come out from ITSMR, I'll have more information on that. But I know the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee has been operating under the assumption that even though folks aren't traveling, there's still a lot of folks who are driving impaired. And we have the marijuana situation, which I'll get into later in the agenda. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
So yeah, Sandy and I will be working on the RFP, and like I mentioned, we intend to collect this data in the fall. So we may bring this up at the next ROSAC as well in July. You know, I may reach out to some of you for ideas for count locations where we can conduct these COVID monitoring counts. And I will be digging through and looking for baseline pre-COVID data to use for comparison. So, you know, someone in the chat box, Valerie in the chat box, mentioned that Wolf Road may be returning to normal. I would like to do counts at, you know, places where there's concentrations of places of employment, offices. Like I said, where work from home may be lingering, colleges, universities, places like that. So if you can think of any locations where you expect that our prior planning assumptions may be turned on their head due to COVID, let me know. Call me or email me or Sandy. Let us know, and we'll try to do counts at those locations.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Related to data collection, there's two other related data collection tasks that we have for this year planned. The first is for horizontal curves. So we've mentioned before that the state is undertaking and developing a roadway departure safety action plan for the state. The state of New York, state DOT, I should say, focus the analysis piece on state-owned roads simply because the data didn't exist on the local roads to do the analysis. The state DOT had collected a tremendous amount of data on their curves. They had traffic volume data in the locations of interest, which we just didn't have on the local system. So what we're proposing as part of our data collection effort is to collect traffic volume and curve characteristic data on non-state roads. We'll model the data collection effort after what the state collected for the state roads. The NISTAT folks have been very gracious in sharing with me all of their background information. We'll do a network screen of the crash data to identify potential sites that meet criteria such as a high number of fatal or serious injury crashes, a high frequency of crashes, and certain types of patterns that reflect the potential of a design challenge, perhaps, or some infrastructure related problem at a curve. And we'll consult with the county and local road owners to get input from them. And of course, they're a blessing to undertake this effort. And we hope that this information we will gather will help us to support our roadway departure safety planning effort here at CDTC. So we'll be reaching out in the coming weeks and months again to get information, particularly from the counties, in looking at the preliminary analysis. When you eliminate the state roads from our regional network, the county roads become much more prominent for roadway departure issues. So I have a feeling a lot of these locations will end up being on county-owned roads. So if you have any thoughts on this project or would like to be more involved, let me know. And I will certainly be keeping this group posted on our activities. The other data collection effort that we're pursuing this year is trail data collection. What we're trying to gather is information on bicycle and pedestrian volume on the trails in the region. We've collected this manually in the past just by going out and counting riders and pedestrians. But we are going to, CDTC is going to invest in automated equipment that will be owned and deployed by CDTC staff to do automated counts. And we're hoping to begin the process of building a database to help with our planning activities, to monitor trail use. And we think that, initially the focus is on shared use trails, but we may be able to use these counters on other facility types as well. The locations will be determined. Obviously, the primary focus is on the regional trail system. And we'll hopefully be able to share some interesting data with the group to get a better idea of who's using the trails and how many people are using them. As we also noted during COVID, trail use was very, very high in the region. There were many reports of almost sort of traffic jams, if you will, with the mix of users on trails interacting and it being very busy. So this will be an interesting piece related to the data collection. So that's all we had on our data collection activities. Did anybody have any questions or other comments they would like to make on that? Okay, hearing none, we'll continue on to the marijuana legalization from a traffic safety perspective. So just yesterday, I was able to listen in on a discussion on this topic from Chuck Deweese from the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. And he kind of gave us some statewide participants kind of a high-level overview of the impact of the legislation on traffic safety and how we're going to be moving forward with this. One of the things he noted is that the new law maintains the driving under the influence will be treated as for marijuana will be treated as a misdemeanor. There actually was a point in the negotiations where it was proposed to drop marijuana use as a traffic violation. So they were successfully to keep it as a misdemeanor charge. The legislation does provide more funding to the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee to increase training for the drug recognition experts or the DREs. Currently, they do about 2 to 4 training classes a year. They plan on doing the same, I think 3 next year, I believe 6 the following year, and maybe up to 8 the year after that. So the idea, while it's been challenging for the police to get qualified and good candidates to participate in this training, the resources are put in place to get more DRE officers trained to allow for better recognition of marijuana impairment in the field. It's a pretty extensive training process for the police, but it's a pretty important one now that we have the marijuana legalized here in New York. There will be a continuation of the training for A-RIDE, which is a program that basically trains officers in again recognizing impaired drivers and other individuals. So that support for that training will continue. The Department of Health has been tapped to conduct a study on cannabis impairment technology. As you've heard in the past, the phrase, there's no BAC for THC. So meaning there's no blood alcohol level equivalent for THC. There's no threshold value at which someone is considered impaired. But there are emerging technologies that certainly identify whether or not someone has used cannabis or has THC in their system. So the Department of Health has been tasked with sort of studying this and perhaps identifying new tools that can be used to help the law enforcement community in identifying someone impaired while driving, particularly if they've been involved in a motor vehicle crash. And then the final thing that I think CDTC will have a role in is the public safety campaigns, the education piece. Chuck DeWeese noted that, you know, there are still a lot of people out there who don't even realize driving while impaired on marijuana is illegal. There's still a perception amongst users that I'm fine, and you're impaired in a different way than you are with alcohol. There's a perception problem. So the GTSC is likely going to be ramping up some public education campaigns using a wide range of media, you know, traditional media like TV, radio, paid social media, billboards, these sorts of things. And it will likely start the education process there with just communicating to folks that driving while impaired is illegal. So that's the status of the marijuana legalization from a traffic safety perspective. The one final thing I will note that Chuck mentioned is there were 9 to 10 proposals made to the governor's office in the negotiations of this legislation that the governor's office approved, passed to the legislature, and they were all related to traffic safety, and not one of them made it into the bill. So they were disappointed that there wasn't more of an emphasis on traffic safety. So, you know, Chuck's term is this is sort of a status quo piece of legislation, and it will remain to be seen what the impact of this will be on the roadway system moving forward. The challenge again is being able to determine a level of impairment for an individual and at what point that impairment impacts driving. All of that is still a work in progress. Any questions about that?
Sandy, we're not the first to do this. Have you seen anything in your connections or circles about other states?
Yes, I actually specifically asked Chuck that question, and his response was, because not one state, and there's other states that have obviously legalized recreational marijuana, did not have before data, because again, there was when an officer fills out a police crash report for impairment other than alcohol, they're just selecting impairment. They're not identifying what you were impaired with. And especially if there's a mix of drugs in the person's system. What New York did do, which is different than other states prior to the enactment of the legislation, is they were starting to tick off and note what the drug was that the person was impaired by. So at the very least, we're going to have some amount of data to make a before and after comparison, whereas most of the other states, really all the other states, did not. So there's still a big learning curve of what the true impacts are. And I think Chuck said it best. It depends on who's researching it and what their angle sort of is at this point. So we have a lot to learn on this subject for sure.
Yeah, what I'm interested in, I watched something on the news, this is probably about 6 years ago. Colorado, they were one of the first to do this, I believe. And they looked at it like I would look at it, because I'm not into this scene, but they legalized marijuana and did not account for the baked goods and the edibles. And so it was unregulated because they didn't put any language in there, and people started eating these things that were apparently like really potent. And it took someone actually died because they were just so far gone. And then they had to pass emergency legislation to set the limits of what you could actually eat. And it's like, so that's where when you get into this, you think marijuana legalization, but I don't believe that's even classified as marijuana. That's something else, right? When you're eating it, and it's still impairing you. So
yeah, I believe in our New York's regulations do account for edibles. So the actual language of the law is about 200 pages deep. So there's a lot in there, and far beyond what we would be concerned with traffic safety, right from regulating dispensaries to the types of edibles, the amount of I think they even regulated how much THC content.
I think you have to at this point. That was a new thing because people didn't even realize that it mattered, and now it is regulated. But I don't know as like marijuana legalization that THC, those edibles. I've heard that those grow in popularity more so because I'm sure you guys have been around it. I work in the city, you can drive around here, man, does that stuff smell.
Yep.
You know, like you could smell a whole block up with just one car. So the edibles, you don't have that with it. And I got to imagine that that's something. Hi,
Yep.
Mark.
Well, we can only hope that traffic incidents will be conducted at much slower speeds after the legalization happens. But all joking aside, one sort of blind spot in the legislation, and this comes from our one of our outreach coordinators who previously was in charge of issuing permits in Park County, Colorado for grow operations. And there is, obviously because of, the law, you can't completely zone out the commercial operate. You can zone out the retail. That's what the legislation says, but you can't zone out the grow operations. So each municipality is going to have to sort of stand up or amend their zoning code to account for where these grow operations can happen. And, what are the negative externalities of that sort of land use? Are there delivery trucks coming in and out? Are there, what materials, what kind of odors will be generated? Is there, because even the growing plant before it's smoked stinks. So how do you deal with those conflicts? And none of that is explicitly spelled out in the law either, but it's going to be extremely complicated to figure that out over the next 2 years or so.
The final thing I'll say on this is, New York, I think no one is surprised that this was the year that it happened. But from a practical standpoint, we were really the last state if you look at our four-sided boundary, Canada has it legal, Vermont, Massachusetts has it legal, New Jersey has it legal. So it was kind of inevitable. It was going to happen. People are already driving through our state impaired, not necessarily impaired, but, potentially impaired. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But as I said earlier, I think CDTC's role in this initially will be to assist with the education component. So, and making sure folks are aware that it is illegal to drive while using any sort of THC product. So stay tuned. We'll see what the next year or so brings on that.
I just want to let you know, I have a 2 o'clock, so I have to take off.
Okay, great. Thanks.
If anything, just email me, and I sent you over that data, an email to try to get the parking data from the city.
Great, appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
All right. The next item is the MUTCD memo that was prepared by the New York State AMPO Safety Working Group and the Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Working Group. We've talked about this previously. Obviously, the MUTCD is being revised. There's a notice of proposed amendments out. A comment period is now open. What we try to do, and to assist everybody at the local government level, is to bring attention to what the MUTCD is proposing and provide information for folks to take a look at the details if they're interested, and to provide and provide comments. So this memo simply summarizes why we're doing this, provides some links to some of the online material in the federal docket, and then highlight some of the proposed changes. Procedures for posting speed limits is an interesting one because it really proposes to expand the consideration of speed limit setting beyond the 85th percentile speed, and actually kind of encourage folks, and if not require them, to consider other aspects, the context of the roadway, lane widths, speed distributions, what have you, with the exception of the higher level roadways, your high-end interstates and rural highways. But in urban areas, for sure, context is something that's more important. We've talked in the past about some of the pedestrian treatments and the new colors that are being allowed on street for use on crosswalks and bicycle facilities and bus lanes. We also talked about some new traffic signal warrant for crash experience, which actually details when the severity and the frequency of crashes warrant a traffic signal. So the introduction of that guidance is there being proposed. pedestrian safety in work zones, some ADA requirements related to push button locations, and how areas are to be designed, curb ramps and what have you for ADA compliance. Clarify some information on rectangular rapid flashing beacons and bring some of the interim approved traffic control devices into the MUTCD officially. There's a whole new chapter on automated vehicles that we've talked about before that we noted here. And then the last page talks about a couple more treatments, but more importantly, provides guidance to you folks on submitting comments and what the FHWA is looking for in those comments. So they're looking for, whether you like a proposed change or disagree with it, you need to provide some rationale for your position, indicate how the proposed change might affect traffic operations, safety, and uniformity, noting whether or not there's cost impacts that have not been considered in the analysis. If you have any existing data or research or experimental findings that support a different position on a treatment, that's one area. If you didn't see something that you were looking for in the proposed changes, they would like to hear about that. And, obviously all of this information will be pulled together over the next year for a more extensive comment period. We have heard, because of the change in federal administration in between the time that the proposed amendments were put together and now, that there could be a heftier review of the proposed changes under the Biden administration. There's certainly some advocates out there pushing for a complete redo of the MUTCD. Whether that happens or not, we will wait and see. But if you are interested in commenting, comments are due May 14th to the federal docket. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And whoops. And the final thing is we have some updates for you on a number of ongoing topics. We'll start here with incident management, the Transportation Incident Management Committee that Jim Huber is leading. I don't think he's on our call today, but there was an initial kickoff meeting held back in February. This regional committee is a Region 1 region, so the 8 counties of Region 1. It's more than just the CDTC 4 counties. But the idea is to hopefully, increase communication and coordination with state and local officials on incident management response. Hopefully, moving forward, there'll be some more activity there. I know Jim has been distracted by a little problem up in Clifton Park related to a little bridge. So, I'm sure DOT hasn't been able to put time to this, but I think there will be some future work done on the TIM committee in the coming months. The CLEAR crash data application update production is set to begin in May at the main office level, which means likely we'll see as users June or July. There'll be training to follow. The big change that I wanted to alert everybody to with CLEAR again is the replacement of the accident location information system, which is the application DOT currently uses to allow us as planners to gain access to crash data, particularly location-based crash data. The big change with CLEAR is going to be some of the analysis tools, which are not going to go live in June or July. They will go live later this year, probably in the late fall, early winter, wherein the state will begin moving away from traditional crash rates and begin using HSM methods for screening their crash network and doing crash data analysis. So that's going to be a big change for all of us. The good news for local government members is that they are bringing finally parity between what you can do in terms of analysis on state roads with what you can do on local roads. So locals will have much greater ability to do crash data analysis using this new tool, which will have a lot more information on the local roads. There's there's going to be more to see about Clear, but at least the initial launch of the basic crash querying functionality will likely begin in June or July of this year. So we'll have more on that for you folks in the coming months as well. Any questions on either of those two topics? Okay. Our community planning technical assistance program, the solicitation has been reopened. As a reminder to this group, we allow a wide range of planning support eligible projects in this program. We can do safety assessments, we can do some operational review, at a very localized level. But if you need some small scale, short duration technical assistance on a safety or a traffic issue, let us know. And you can go to our webpage on the technical assistance program for more information on that. Another project that is going to be launching by CDTC in the coming months is a regional truck parking study. This was just recently approved by our planning committee. A scope of work is in development. The effort will be about $137,000 consultant effort. Some things for this group to keep in mind is if you are aware of a truck parking issue in your community, I'm sure that we would love to hear from it. Chris Bauer is our freight planner. If you would like to reach out to Chris, or you can send it to me and I'll forward it to Chris, about any known truck parking challenges you have in your region or in your local area, feel free to pass those along. That would be helpful to know from firsthand folks. The bus lane feasibility study, we should be doing a kickoff meeting, I hope, in the late May, early June timeframe. We did hold consultant interviews and a selection was made. I can't make it public yet as we're still contacting all of the consultant teams and entering contract negotiations, but we should be able to make that announcement fairly soon. So be looking for that one to kick off, like I said, early summer. Any questions on those two planning studies for CDTC? Okay, Andrew, I'll turn it to you about the New York State AMPO reliability workshop.
Okay, we have an announcement from NICE-AMPO from the TSM&O working group. We are working with Federal Highway New York Division on maybe bringing a planning for reliability workshop to the state, and the likely dates for that will be in late July. We're looking at July 26, 27, 28. The actual training sessions will be just 2 hours a day on each of those days. We're still setting up speakers, but just something to keep on your radar. Late July, NICE-AMPO planning for reliability workshop.
Folks may remember we had one of these in Albany, I think about 2-3 years ago. So at the time, we did not have the state's TSMO plan in place. So we do have that now. So, this may be more informative in terms of the bigger picture of where the department is going with some of their work moving forward. So just keep that in mind.
Yep, and I should also mention this will be held virtually, so very easy to attend regardless of where you are in the state as well.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to share with you folks, let me stop my screen real quick, the results of our Capital Coexist mini grant program solicitation. We have approved a set of projects for funding. Sorry, it takes a second just to swap screens, but here are the awards. The dollar values are not quite all finalized for some of them. There's a little bit of tweaking going on behind the scenes, but in terms of the projects that are were funded through the program this year, we're going to work with Town and Village of Corinth and the PTSA at the school district to do a Safe Routes to School demonstration project. We'll also be working with the Saratoga Regional YMCA, also in the Town and Village of Corinth, on a walking school bus. Those two projects will be coordinated together. And we'll be working with the Town of Clinton Park on sort of a trail discovery event, which is intended to be an interactive opportunity to have students go around, not just students, anyone in the community, go around and gather some factual information virtually through an app to, encourage trail use. And it will also disseminate traffic safety information as part of that. Albany Bike Rescue's bicycle voucher program is still in place. That's kind of become an ongoing event. We'll be partnering new this year with the East Greenbush Police Department on a pop-up event and slow down campaign in one section of the town of East Greenbush. And I think that's the kind of project that this group, I would love to see promoted amongst local police departments, because there's a lot of opportunity for us through this program to get beyond just bicycle and pedestrian safety planning work. There's all kinds of things we can do. And this is good. The East Greenbush example is a good one for expanding the range of things that we do with slow down campaigns. Similarly, in Bike-A-Toga in Saratoga Springs is also doing a slow down campaign. So, and Albany Bicycle Coalition is also hosting a group ride with the funding. So, again, in terms of the direction I would like to see this program go is do more on the pop-up events and slow down campaigns and build some of the capacity at the local level to be able to use this funding resource for these kinds of activities to support safety in communities. So keep that in mind, share this with your local government folks. And if you have any questions about that, we anticipate we'll be soliciting again for this program over the winter. Usually we send it out in December. And then the final thing I wanted to mention today is the Smart Communities Guidebook, which is Jen Sapanis just shared our presentation with us on this topic a few meetings ago, but we are going to be working with a consultant to develop a guidebook to show sort of, best practices for local governments in implementing smart communities projects. And it could be anything from, a smart parking app. It could be developing an app to track where your snow plows are going and which streets have been plowed. There's the whole range of smart communities initiatives that we'll be cataloging and just building into this guidebook. And the consultant I believe was just selected. Let me see if I can say it publicly. I think I can. But we anticipate that our working group, as well, our advisory committee, I should say, as well as the members of the Smart Communities Advisory Committee will be involved and used as sort of a sounding board toward the development of the guidebook. So there'll be more to come in the coming months on that topic, and we look forward to having your input on it. And with that, I think that is all I had to share today. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to share? Okay, hearing none. The next meeting is scheduled for July 22nd at 1 p.m. I'll send a calendar Outlook meeting notice in the next few days just to get it on folks' calendars. We'll try to have some different topics for presentation purposes. One thing that we've been monitoring closely is the impact of the closure of the Sidderly Road Bridge from a modeling perspective for CDTC's operations planning work. It's an interesting time when something suddenly gets taken out of commission like that, to see what the impact of on the system is. So, we're hoping to be able to look at our regional travel model, see what it says, and then hopefully next year when the bridge ultimately gets replaced, because that does appear to be the plan, we'll be gathering some traffic data with NISDOT to confirm or sort of validate the findings of the model. So we'll stay tuned on that activity. And with that, that's all we had today. If you have any questions or comments about anything we've shared, let us know. If you have any ideas or any topics that you are interested in hearing more about, also let us know that. And with that, we will see this group again in July. So thanks everyone for your time today, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.